Good evening, explorers. If you don't know me, my name is Explorer Torie, and I'm from the Nevada Conservation League, and welcome to another installment of Native Nevada Nature. If you're new to this, each week I do a presentation that highlights one native plant or animal species right here in our desert of Nevada. This is a great educational presentation for all ages to enjoy, watch, and learn. So I hope you enjoy this special episode today. So last week we had a riddle that revealed our native Nevada nature plant species for today. And I'm going to read you that riddle one last time so you can think about it one last time before I reveal to you the answer. I am a large plant native to the Southwest. In the Mojave Desert is where I do best. By sight, I'm a cactus. By name, I'm a tree. But I'm actually a yucca, as tall as they can be. A biblical man and I share the same name. I'm also the Spanish dagger with spikes to blame. And I'm going to give a quick shout out to Lojan Wortham. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Thank you, Lojan, for being the first person to guess this riddle. And it is no other than the Joshua tree, our very own Joshua tree right here in the Mojave Desert. So this guy, his genus species or scientific name is Yucca brevifolia, which yucca is the type of plant it is, and brevifolia is from the New Latin, from brevis, which means short or small, and folium, which means leaf. So it literally translates as short leaf yucca. But what is a yucca? A yucca is a genus of perennial shrubs and trees. They're all found in the family of asparagus, the asparagus family, closely related to agave, which is used to make tequila, if you are old enough to know what that means. There's about 40 to 50 species of notable plant species that are known for having rosettes of evergreen, which means they don't shed their leaves, they stay green all year round, tough, sword-shaped leaves, and they have large, big clusters of white or whitest flowers. So you can clearly see that with the picture on the left. Kind of looks like it has bayonets or swords sticking out, sharp, pointed leaves, and then those clusters of white flowers. They are all native to hot and dry parts of the Americas and the Caribbean. So Joshua trees, even though they're called trees, are technically not really a tree. They're more tree-like. A lot of people think they are cactus or cacti, but they are actually just succulents. They are a plant that stores water. In dry ecosystems, however, the Joshua tree is known as the tree of the desert. Maybe only one of the bigger plants you'll see for miles. So, how do you identify the Joshua tree? This picture right here is a clear, good example of what a classic Joshua tree looks like. They can be anywhere from about 20 to 70 feet tall. They are evergreen, once again, never shed their leaves. Tree-like plant. Their trunks are fibrous or bark, like thin bark-like, that are kind of like cork. You can literally go up, and I'll have some videos where you can get really close to the bark. You can literally just pull it apart. It's so fibrous. It's so cork-like. The trunk consists of thousands of small fibers, and it actually lacks growth rings. So a lot of scientists have a hard time determining the age of these trees. They are known as being top-heavy branch system. You can kind of see that from this picture right here, how they are really top-heavy. Like they have all the leaves, all the branches on top, and then just one dominant trunk towards the bottom. And they also have a very extensive root system, which is vital in the desert. The evergreen trees the leaves are dark green, linear, bayonet shaped or sword shaped, and so that means they're broad at the base and they taper to a sharp point. And the leaf margins are white and serrated, which means sharp. So if they're close to the ground, I do not recommend touching the leaves. They're like little swords, literally. They will poke you. The flowers appear in these clusters, as you can see in the top right-hand picture. They are usually creamy white to green tepals, and they're fused in the middle, and they are all surrounded by these lobes. It's a big cluster of flowers. And the fruits, which you can see at the bottom right-hand picture, are known to be semi-fleshy fruit that is elliptical, so not super circular, but elliptical shaped, and they could be brown or green color. And when you open it up, they have many flat seeds inside. Pretty much this picture does its justice. You got the leaves, you got the fruit, you got the tree. The branching is notable as well. They kind of have these weird, like, curvature movements. It's known to be kind of unusual twisted shape. And that's actually all because of a boring beetle larvae. The Joshua tree actually won't branch off. It will grow leaves in the area where it ends its branching, but it won't make a new branch unless the branch is killed. And usually a boring beetle larvae will kill off the branch. And once it's killed off, it will then rebranch and grow out from that killed area. So a lot of times you'll get these weird branching shapes, and that's all because of the beetle killing off and destroying the leaf-making buds. Now that's how you identify a Joshua tree, right? Well, actually, there are two known subspecies, or two recognized subspecies of the Joshua tree that have been identified. The first one being mostly known as the Joshua tree or the Western Joshua tree. That is Yucca brevifolia, variation brevifolia. So that's the big tall one that you see right here. This one next to it is called the Jaeger's Joshua tree, which is Yucca brevifolia, variation Jaegeriana. Pardon my Latin, very bad. But the easiest way to tell the difference between the two is using these great examples, these great pictures. So the Western Joshua tree is known for being much taller, much broader. As you can see, there's a person there standing next to that Joshua tree, much taller. They have less dichotomous branching, so the branching is not as prominent, and the leaves tend to be a little bit longer. Whereas the Jaeger's Joshua tree tends to be much shorter, about less than 20 feet, 20 to 40 feet usually. They have shorter leaves, much tinier leaves than the Western variation, and the branching is much more frequent. So you can see this picture on the right-hand side of Jaeger's Joshua tree is just a bunch of branching all over each other. Whereas the Western Joshua tree is much taller and less branchy, I guess. So you'll see those two variations out here in the southwestern United States, but those are the easiest ways to tell them apart from each other. The Eastern Joshua tree, or Jaeger's Joshua tree, was actually named after Edmund C. Jaeger, who later became the Dean of American Desert Studies in the mid-20th century. And that's where the namesake came from. So here's a really good map to show you the distributions of the two different subspecies of the Joshua tree. So everything in the lighter blue, kind of where California is and a little bit north of Nevada, that's where you're going to see the Western Joshua tree. That's where you're going to see the iconic Joshua tree. The ones that are more greenish on the other side, those are where you're going to see the Jaeger's Joshua tree, the other subspecies. Now, if you look closely at this map, right where it says Nevada there, where it says number 22, that is called the Kickapoo Valley. And in that valley, they have distributions of both the brevifolia and the Jaegeriana variations. So those two subspecies can be found in that one area. And hybridization occurs frequently, which means they mate with each other. So there might be a blending of the two in that area, but it's all in the Kickapoo Valley. So if you ever make your way out there, you can find both subspecies in one area. So now that you know where to find them, let me describe to you where you can find them in the southwestern desert. So like I said, they're endemic to here in the southwestern desert, mostly found in the Mojave Desert. They are iconic Mojave Desert species. You'll find them anywhere. It's a major indicator that you're in the Mojave Desert when you can see them there. You'll find them in western Arizona, southeastern California, southern Nevada, and southwestern Utah. And they can occur into altitudes between 1,300 and 5,900 feet. That's a huge elevation you can find them in, a great variation. The Joshua tree survives in areas with cold winters, hot summers, and very little precipitation. The cold winters has actually been known to be a very dominant trait of the Joshua tree. They say that if they don't get that cold winter where they have that dormant period, they cannot blossom or distribute their seeds. So it's considered essential for the Joshua tree to have a dormant period where they can basically rest in these cool temperatures. They occur in high, dry sites on flat mesas and gentle slopes of the Mojave Desert, and it is described as a transitional zone or transitional plant between the Sonoran Desert and the Great Basin. So the Sonoran found in southern Arizona, just below us, and then the Great Basin Desert found above us in northern Nevada. Right smack between the two, you will find the Joshua tree. So let's go a little bit about the history, the timeline of being a Joshua tree. And you might be asking yourself, Explorer Torie, why do I have a picture of a moth when it says the timeline of a Joshua tree? Well, you'll be surprised to learn that these two are pretty much together. The blooming flowers are all pollinated by this one moth, the Yucca moth. It spreads its pollens around while also laying eggs inside the flower. The larvae eat the seeds of the Joshua tree, but enough seeds to remain to reproduce. If for any reason the Yucca moth lays too many larvae inside their eggs, the Joshua tree can also actively abort their ovaries and get rid of it if there's been too many laid. So what this means is that the Joshua tree is pretty much dependent on this Yucca moth for distributing its pollen and distributing its seeds and getting it spread out to distribute itself. It's known as a symbiotic relationship, very much connected to each other. The Joshua tree is highly, highly dependent on this one species of moth. Now, once the Joshua tree gets spread out by the Yucca moth and they are distributed and they start to germinate, the Joshua trees actually grow pretty fast for the desert for their new seedlings. They grow at an average of about 3 inches per year for their first 10 years, which is pretty incredible considering how dry our desert is, considering how little nutrients our soils have. The fact that they can grow pretty quickly and establish themselves is pretty incredible. Like I said before, they end up having a deep and extensive root system, which is highly viable or crucial in order to live out in the desert to get access to water. And let's go about reproducing. Actually, let's talk about clones. Attack of the clones. So I already mentioned before, they use seeds and flowers to reproduce, and they will actively grow those out in good seasons. But like I said, our harsh desert doesn't have the nicest weather, nicest resources, And the Joshua tree depends on those cold winters, remember. If they don't have that dormant period of those cold winters, they may not produce seeds and flowers the next following year. But there is a way for them to still be able to reproduce without seeds and flowers. And this is all about cloning. Joshua trees will reproduce asexually and produce exact copies of themselves in the same area. And it's pretty simple. They will just, their root system, their rhizomes will branch out and then sprout, and then their neighbors will end up being identical copies of themselves. It's a really handy thing for them to be able to reproduce in conditions where they won't be able to produce seeds or flowers, which are costly. They take a lot of resources to produce. So clones tend to be an option in these harsh deserts to still be able to reproduce. And because of this, they tend to live a very long time. I said before that they're fast growers when they first are seedlings, but once they get established, they're pretty much slow growers. And they'll be slow and therefore be old and very highly established in these areas. So it's currently estimated that the oldest Joshua tree in California is over 1,000 years old. And typically, they live to be about a lifespan of 150 years to about 500 years. So long life, these guys. Very incredible. So the next time you pass by a Joshua tree that's pretty big, has lots of branching on it, looks pretty established, that guy is probably older than you. Just, something to think about. Now, you can imagine with so much of the Joshua tree found in the Mojave Desert, known as an indicator species for our desert, a lot of plants and animals depend on them in these communities. For example, there's about 25 bird species that nest in the Joshua trees. Some of them include the red-shafted flicker and the cactus woodpecker. They make a nest, they burrow into the branch or the trunk and make a little nest. And once they leave, it provides habitats for other birds who may not be burrowing into the nest. There are lizards and invertebrates that use various parts of the tree for cover. For instance, the little Yucca night lizard relies completely on this plant and could not survive without it. They live in the bark and they nest in the trees, and they live in the fallen, rotting trunk of the Joshua trees, and they dine on the insect larvae and the ants and termites that find themselves there in the Joshua tree trunk. Last but not least, there are many mammals that rest and use this as well. There's wood rats and pack rats that use the sharp spines to make a little nest, and the sharp spines help create kind of like a barbed wire fencing and a little bit of protection against other predators out there. So thank you, Joshua trees, for being so vital in our community and being there as a resource for many of our animal and plant species. And not only is this important to the plant animal communities we out there, it has been historically important for a lot of our Native American and indigenous tribes. For instance, the Cahuilla Tribe, they have a very special word for the Joshua tree in particular. And I'm not going to say it to not put any disgrace on their language, but they used it in many aspects of their lives, from cooking to making sandals, to roofing, storage containers, and even using it to treat STDs. A lot of the different tribes used it for food because you can eat the seeds and the flowers, but a lot of the tribes use it to depend on all aspects of their life. A rich indigenous community this Joshua tree has. Now, the most famous place of the Joshua tree, probably you've already heard of, is Joshua Tree National Park. This is located in the southeastern part of California, near 29 Palms, California. This has the most concentrated amount of Joshua trees you can find anywhere in the world. There's plenty of area, and the Joshua Tree National Park itself is huge. It's about 800,000 acres, and it is a unique opportunity to see the blending of the Sonoran Desert and the Mojave Desert all in one area. So I highly recommend going out there and visiting. It's only a few hours away from Las Vegas or Southern Nevada. I will give you some warnings about the national park. One, there's no cell service. It's pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and it's hot. We are in the desert. It gets very much hot. So you want to bring lots of water, prepare for the worst and the best. If you plan on hiking, make sure to bring enough food and a lot of things to handle the extreme heat because, boy, it gets hot out there. I'm not sure about COVID-19, how that has affected the Joshua Tree National Park, but I do know that if you want to see Joshua Tree National Park from the comfort of your own home, go ahead and check out their National Park website. They actually have a virtual section where you can see many parts of the park from your own home. I'll post the link following this presentation on Facebook, but you can always just find yourself Joshua Tree National Park, the National Park page, and find their virtual section. It'll be very cool to see from your own home. Now you may be asking, Explorer Torie, you never talked about why it's called Joshua Tree. Who named that? That's a really good question. Actually, it is believed that Mormon settlers coming out here in the mid-1800s gave Joshua Tree their iconic name. The story goes that the pioneers believed the tree's limbs resembled the upstretched arms of the biblical figure Joshua, raising his hands in prayer. And you can kind of see the resemblance, right? Kind of looks like the Joshua Tree is always doing this, right? So there was a group of Mormon settlers who crossed the Mojave Desert in the mid-19th century, and it is believed that one of them coined the term Joshua Tree. There is no actual attestment or person who is credited for the name Joshua Tree, and it's all a myth, but that's where they believe the saying goes. They also say the shaggy leaves kind of give the appearance of a beard, which Joshua had. But the name Joshua Tree has not been recorded until after Mormon contact. So the Mormon settlers were one of the first outside settlers to kind of inhabit this area from the eastern side. So it's probably believed that one of them gave this guy his iconic name. Now, we've looked at the history of the Joshua Tree, but as always, it's very important to look at the current status or what is happening to the Joshua Tree right now. As of today, the conservation status of the Joshua Tree is that it is protected, but it's not listed. What that means is that a lot of places make it illegal to take or unearth a Joshua Tree. I know when I was doing conservation work and biology out in the field, anytime I had a project where people had to dig out an area of the desert, they always had to transplant or relocate the Joshua Tree from one place to another place that was similar. So there's a lot of different rulings on the Joshua Tree. Most of the time it's illegal to disturb or touch it, but as it is currently stated, it is not listed as an endangered species. Plenty of different groups and organizations are petitioning to get the Joshua Tree listed as an endangered species because it's so crucial to the ecosystem of the Mojave Desert. Like I said, this is iconic. You can't find it anywhere else in the Mojave Desert. But the biggest reason for putting it on the endangered species list is the climate change concern. So it is believed, and there's been plenty of studies on it, that the Joshua Tree is very, very much vulnerable to climate change. Research has shown that there's a high probability that the Joshua Tree will be eliminated from Joshua Tree National Park, and the probability that their populations will be reduced by 90% of their current range by the end of the 21st century. That would literally change the entire ecosystem of the Mojave Desert because it's here, it's everywhere. And then for it to just disappear? Now, this scientific prediction is based off of a couple of different research. It is mostly due to the Yucca moth's importance on the Joshua Tree. The Yucca moth highly depends on the yucca, or the Joshua tree highly depends on the yucca moth to distribute its seeds and its pollen. And if the yucca moth were suddenly to disappear, the Joshua tree would lose its main source for reproduction. And there's already studies showing that in areas where it has been increased heat, in these areas, that the Joshua tree is not reproducing much, or not reproducing very well. And it's because the yucca moth can't handle these hot, intensive heats. And therefore, the Joshua tree is being affected by it. Of course, as climate change continues, it is predicted that it will only get hotter here in the Mojave Desert. So it is a huge, huge concern about the Joshua tree. So if there's anything that you want to get involved with in protecting the Joshua tree, protecting Joshua Tree National Park, please let me know. I'm part of the climate action team, so we're always trying to combat climate change in any way possible. So if you want to get involved in that work, just send a comment below and I'll get you the resources after this. One quick fact about this conservation status: there is actually believed that the giant ground sloth, the Shasta ground sloth, which was here over 13,000 years ago, played a role in the Joshua tree dispersal. So the dung of ground sloths, these big old creatures, have been found to contain Joshua leaves, fruits, and seeds, and it suggested that the sloths might have played a key in the tree's dispersal. Since Joshua tree can only be found here in the Mojave Desert, a lot of people believe that it was brought in and dispersed by the great sloth, the giant ground sloth's work. And now that the ground sloth is gone, no longer helping with seeds dispersal, it's believed that the Joshua tree will not be able to expand and reach favorable climates, favorable deserts, areas, once the ground sloth is gone or once the yucca moth is gone. They must have an issue with dispersing to new territories. So if climate change becomes a bigger issue, these guys are going to be in trouble. But we're always out there. People are out there protecting the Joshua tree right now, even if the giant ground sloth is not here anymore. Well, that's all I have on the Joshua tree. Very interesting, you know? It's like we have these guys everywhere in our desert, but do we really know much about them? Speaking of which, it is now open for questions time. If you are watching this through Facebook Live and you have any questions on the desert Joshua tree or any deserts in general, any desert plants, the yucca moth, the ground sloth, go ahead and just post them in the comments and I will answer them right now. And it looks like we already have a few questions coming in right now. Question 1, can I grow it in my backyard? The answer to that is yes and no. You definitely can. I'm almost positive that certain types of nurseries have the Joshua tree available. I will say that it is illegal to go out and just dig one up and plant it in your backyard. So please don't do that. But always remember that the yucca moth depends on the Joshua tree depends on the yucca moth to distribute its plants and seeds. So you may not get lots of Joshua trees growing in your yard if you have a Joshua tree there, but you can definitely have one in your yard. And if you live close to the desert, more than likely you have a Joshua tree very near your area already. Question number 2, can I eat the fruits? And I guess I'll answer this with question number 3. Can you eat the pods and the seeds? So as far as I know, you can eat the fruits, you can eat the flowers, but there's always give and takes when you take resources from a plant species. They say that you should only take about 20% of a plant species resources and to not affect their growing or their life cycle. So please be generous. Once again, these guys are protected, so I would leave native species, I would leave them alone as much as possible, but it is theoretically possible to eat their seeds and flowers. Another thing you can eat is their root systems. They do have a root system that is highly filled with this a powerful sapinoid liquid or whatever, something in their roots that is highly concentrated in them. So technically they're able to eat it, but it's a poisonous concentration that is located in their roots. They do say though that it's not enough that it would actually affect you physically unless you ate a lot of it, but the roots are also able to be eaten in short distances, short periods at the time. Let's see. I think that's all the questions I have. Yep, I think that's it. Thank you guys for giving me your questions. And if I didn't get to your question this round, or if you have any further questions throughout the day about the Joshua Tree or the Mojave Desert, go ahead and just put them in the comment section below and I will get to them later. But next week, I have another activity. So today this week we're doing a coloring page of our next native Nevada nature species on the desert horned lizard. So go ahead and you can download that. I have a PDF version that will be available, and go ahead and color yourself a horned lizard. And if you finish your coloring page, go ahead and just post it on the Native Nevada Nature Facebook page, and I might just show it on next week's episode. But I will be joined by a special guest speaker next week, so hopefully you will enjoy next week's episode with my mystery speaker. But until then, you could check out every week at 5 p.m. Wednesday night for another Native Nevada Nature. If you are liking this series, this episode on a weekly spotlight for native plants or native animal species, go ahead and just give a like in the comment, or give a comment, give a heart, anything to show your love. Share it out to friends, family, colleagues, anybody who would enjoy learning a little bit about our desert. I want to continue to do this presentation, so it's always good to have good feedback that people are enjoying it and people are watching it. And of course, if you want to get involved in Native Nevada Nature a little bit more, if you're interested in learning about plants or animal species, or maybe even doing a presentation with me, go ahead and just put your message in the comment section and I will reach out to you later, because we all can be explorers out here. But until then, keep on exploring.